All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining again for another episode of SEO Fight Club. Today, we have a special treat. We have a show created by our very own Lee Witcher. We have some audio in the background because I am a professional, like always. Got that pause. All right, let me say hello in the YouTube chat. So if you are watching live, we are monitoring the YouTube chat for questions. And so feel free to ask questions at any point in time. Saying hello there now. And I will pop that out so I can watch it. Awesome. Okay, so Lee, I'll let you take it over.
All right. Let's start off with the little boilerplate stuff here. Let's make sure that we can get this. Give me 1 second. I got to get the presentation one running because I too am a professional. This is fun.
Yeah, it's always tricky when you're trying to manage the slides and everything because it takes over all your screens.
It does. It does indeed. All right, so we'll go ahead and do this. We'll go here. There we go. So Carolyn, what's new on the podcast?
Well, Lee, I think I came up with a topic. I don't think anybody will like it. Are you a lead generation company or a managed SEO agency?
Ooh, that's
It's
intriguing.
on my I hate client SEO.
So can you say a little bit more about that? That just sounds fun.
Well, I think I think most business owners don't even know the difference between the two. And you can tell by the questions that they start asking and the criteria by which they determine success. And I'm not saying that it isn't important to their business, but I am saying that, putting everything onto your SEO company, including closing, is a little much. So you can already tell which direction I'm going to take it. But I think really having that conversation and being clear is part of the setting expectations conversation that has to happen. But I don't think sometimes even SEO agencies realize what they may say they're an agency, but they're actually performing like they're lead gen.
Yeah, it's amazing how often SEO becomes a catch-all for everything that the business fails to do. So if there are bugs in the website, if there are typos in the product data, it all eventually ends up as work on an SEO's plate.
I love that. That's a great subject.
And a lot of it, like if you're doing, 3-month contracts, a lot of it ends up being unpaid work that you get no credit for. And if there is too much crap in that part of, things, like if there are too many problems there, it can eat away at your progress on getting ranking results. And then you get judged on the ranking results, even though you had to clean up this gigantic mess first in order for that to happen. And so it becomes a very important thing that you identify those messes and you include them in your quotes and in your timetables. Because, if you don't see that, it's a big problem. And that's why I don't like 3-month contracts, because there's no way you can handle them if you don't catch them.
And
Great
where can we
topic.
find
Great
where can we
topic.
find this nice confessions of an SEO?
Every Friday morning at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. And you can, anywhere you can get a podcast, you can find it. And if you Google, you'll find it.
Cool. And rumor has it there is a little training going on this Thursday.
Yes. In response to, just because I can't answer every question that comes through, but I'm going to be doing a short training, literally, on how do you know your pages are indexed. And I know in this group it's like, define what indexing means, but I am in the camp of, if you can find it by your keywords, that's indexed. Search Console isn't necessarily telling you that you can find it. So it's like out of the tools, and I'm going to show exactly how I set up my test page. So if somebody wants to take that and put that on their actual pages that they're working on and things like that, and then I'll just show them like how you can do it, how do you keep track of it, so that you can know, okay, the reason I'm seeing this, I know by what I can pull it up with, I know that that's the change I made on the 14th. And obviously the changes I made on the 20th haven't been, recrawled and pushed out again.
Right.
More self-knowledge of our own content. No tools, no SEO, no Google, what we can find out ourselves. I think it's real freedom.
Cool. And so all I have to do is go to bit.ly/Carolyn training here, and I can sign up for this.
Yes, I am charging a nominal fee. It's $14. So if it's too much for you, I understand, but I tried to make it so it would be a no-brainer.
Can I buy all of your hours for $14?
No, you cannot.
Just asking for a friend this off. That sounds like a good little piece for people that want to learn, how to judge, what Google is doing, relative to indexing with their pages. This is going to be a great little tool to add to your tool chest.
Thank you.
Now we're obligated. Where's Clint?
I think he ducked out, so he probably had a call.
He had a call.
So if he hops back on, we'll circle back to it.
Yeah, we're all hoping that this comes back soon. I know it was feeling like it was at least on the event horizon, whereas earlier in the summer it wasn't even on anywhere to be seen on his to-do list. So, all right, tested SEO training. It's a training class that I do. It's 8 weeks of live training, uncovering, how the Google algorithm works. It's a lot of tested data that hasn't been published anywhere. This is sort of how I rank stuff. It is different than things out there because you have access to me for 8 weeks, walking you through and helping you step by step get through this. Next training class starts August 3rd. So if you are interested, hit up testedseotraining.com and arrange to talk with me, because not everybody gets in. Also, kind of a fun one, Terry Power and I are doing a little local ranking boot camp in Greensboro, North Carolina, July 30th. That'll be a 1 day just devoted to local rankings. And it's not us lecturing. We're actually going to roll up sleeves. You're going to come with a project, and we're going to spend the day helping you get everything built that you need to get that site ranking better than it is right now. Terry, you want to have any comments on this?
It'll be great value. You'll be learning ways to rank locally that don't take 6 months for you to see results. You'll see results when you get back home Monday. Some you'll see during the day, Saturday, in fact. But yeah, it's using some methods that Lee and I both use, and so do some other people. But hands-on training, and you get a chance to, actually see Lee in person. So
Don't press the crowd away with that kind of threat. I think one of the other things is that this will actually, the training actually starts before the boot camp. You're going to see ranking changes before you even arrive with some of the stuff that we have you do in advance. So if you're interested, look at rankingbootcamp.com. So today we're going to talk about do reviews matter for local rankings? But before we start, I want to set a little stage here. Data misleads. And as I was going through, I had an idea for how to do a little analysis to sort of get some insight into whether or not reviews matter for local rankings. And as I was going through it, I found myself going, oh, I need to correct for this, or I need to investigate that. So there's two layers to this. One is the local ranking thing, but one is also looking at how you interpret these sort of analyses, because I see a lot of these out there, a lot of correlational studies and aggregate studies that draw conclusions when they haven't eliminated a lot of other possible causes for those relationships. So people end up taking them as gospel because they're published on this website or by this guru or whatever.
Well, on this point, like there's this debate, and I know where you're going, and I agree, but I also want to point out that there's also this kind of belief out there that because you can't definitively prove something with correlation, that means it's garbage and needs to be thrown out. And I would like to point out that what we use statistics for is making better educated guesses. There's no absolute certainty, but what we like to do is we like to take, a field of 2,100 things we could work on and reduce it down to 2 or 3 dozen likely suspects. And when we pick from those 2 or 3 dozen likely suspects, instead of picking from 2,100 things, our guesses get much better. We get better success rates when we make those educated guesses. And so it's not about being 100% or definitively knowing what Google's doing. It's about having really strong evidence that supports how you spend your time. And so I kind of like to push back a little bit if you're going too far down the road of saying, well, we have to control for all variables and we have to know with absolute certainty, because we never will, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I think that's correct. I'm not in the camp by any stretch of the imagination that data can mislead and studies have flaws, therefore ignore all data. You know me better than that.
Yeah. But I just like to nip.
Oh, absolutely.
On.
But I think the key is that on the other extreme, what I fight against is people saying, hey, here's a snippet of data, therefore. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's a lot of things that you have to look at before you can do the definitive therefore, or even the plausible therefore. And that's one of the things that I see a lot in these sort of, big studies. And they have impressive names like, we studied 2 million keywords and this is what we found, or we looked at, 20 million backlinks, this is what we found. Like, that's a great starting point. It's a place where I start. But it's not conclusive a lot of the time, and I think a lot of times people don't know how to think about that. What else might be impacting, this sort of analysis, including the bias of the person doing the analysis.
Yeah, half of those are hilarious if you read them. They're like, we analyze, 2 million keywords, and John Mueller says, it's like, okay.
Right. And that was one of the things, a few people here know that, but for, a decade, I volunteered every year at my kids' school to be a middle school science fair judge. And I was known as the scary judge. But the number one question that I would ask kids after they did their particular presentation on, does, Coca-Cola affect plant growth or whatever it is, is what else might have caused these results? And that's the thing that determined who really understood the scientific method and who didn't. If you sit there and they just had one answer, there's nothing else. It had to be this thing. I knew that they didn't really understand it. But a lot of times, even the kids at that level could sit there and say, well, it might have been affected by this or that or this thing or that thing. Like, that's awesome. That's all you need to know. It doesn't mean that you're right or wrong. At least you're aware of what else might be behind the data. So we'll dive into reviews. A lot of local SEO articles list reviews as a ranking factor. Roundups, things like that, they're all there. And they say, you got to have reviews. Reviews drive things. And, it's out there. We know that reviews are a conversion factor because there's an infinite number of tests in a lot of different fields, a lot of different ways, online, offline, that just show those reviews have an impact on conversion. They have an impact on click-through rates. They have an impact on all those sort of things. But is there strong evidence that reviews impact rankings? So what I wanted to do is just grab some data and dive into that a little bit. So what I did was I picked 8 niches. I picked these niches because they had significant keyword volume. They're fairly popular. They're broad. They're not all in home services, for example. And then I picked 40 out of the 50 most populated US cities and then started matching them up so that each one of the 8 niches appeared, for 5 different cities. So you get these random pairs like Chicago chiropractor, Miami dentist, etc. And that should give us a broad enough data set to look and see, hey, do reviews seem to correlate, with rankings or impact rankings in other ways? Questions on this? Do reviews affect local rankings? Do we mean maps or organic rankings? We're looking at maps rankings here only. We're not looking at organic.
And when you say should give us a broad enough data set, is that a assumption you're putting into it, or do you have a mathematical basis for that?
A little of both. At this particular stage, when you have this many data points, and you'll see the number of data points is over 7,000 data points here, that there's enough data to draw conclusions to some degree, or at least hint at relationships or show outright relationships.
Okay.
So then what I did was I took those 40 city plus niche keyword combinations and I scraped the data out of local rankings. We preserved the ranking order, but then I got rid of the suburb data. So if we're looking at Oklahoma City, we're not looking at Moore, Norman, Yukon, and the suburbs around it, because there are different factors at different times in the algorithm that can affect those. So we're looking at Oklahoma City rankings for whatever the niche is within Oklahoma City, using those, and we took those rankings. So the first thing we'll look at is just the data distribution by niche, and we can see that not all niches are the same size. We've got 7,000 data points, which is awesome, but there's quite a disparity between the top niches and the bottom niches. So lawyers and dentists, there are a lot more of those than there are locksmiths and roofers. So one of the first things that we need to do is we need to see if there are differences by niche, because the weightings here are enough to throw off analysis. It's enough here that dentist and lawyer can have an undue impact on the overall analysis just by themselves because they are so large. Questions or observations on this? What do you think, Ted?
Well, I'm wondering what the implications of there being 3 lawyers for every pizza place are.
That is a philosophical question that we will not handle today, I can tell you. But it's a good one, and I was a little bit surprised at some of the distribution here. I would have thought there would have been, nearly as many, plumbers as lawyers and, those sort of things, just personal things. I didn't think there were as many chiropractors as there were relative to some of the other home services. Just, it was interesting to see that. Now, some of that can be affected a little bit by city size, but, because we chose large cities and then we just randomly assigned the niches to them, it should have been fine, but still there could be another impact in there. So the first thing we want to do is we have 7,000 data points. Does review count correlate with rankings? So the correlation is 0.015. Anybody that looks at Quora data understands that that's a low one. In fact, the critical value is 0.028, which means that this correlation needed to be above 0.28 for it to be statistically significant with that many data points. And it wasn't. So if we just took this cut at it, we would say that reviews are not a ranking factor.
Now, when Lee says above, you have to understand with correlation coefficients, we're talking about the distance from 0, positive or negative. Mm-hmm. So it's not about which one is greater on a number line. It's about which one is furthest from 0.
Yeah.
So the global correlation needed to be further than a 0.028 positive or negative in order to be statistically significant.
Right. So it got about halfway to what was necessary,
which is shocking. I thought for sure reviews would have had some bearing in the local algorithm. So I'm a little shocked by that.
That's, again, it's the first pass. And, the problem with this is the aggregation of all the data, because averages can mislead. And this type of analysis I've seen done over and over and over again. And I'm looking like, yeah, but did you dive down into the data to see if there are, little pockets of things which are dissimilar, or throwing apples and oranges and, tires and epistemology into one bucket. It's like, you have to look at that. So, I saw this and I'm like, that's interesting. We'll dive a little bit deeper and see what's going on. So let's break it out by niche. And what I did was, if you look, you can see the rankings 1 through 20. I just pulled the top 20. There's many more than this in there, but you can kind of see for each one of those niches what the average review count is by niche. So here, for chiropractor, across the 5 cities, the average review count for the first position was 224, and 136 for position 2, 102, etc. Position 5 here's got 225. It's got more than position 1 on average across, these things. And you can just look at the data across here and see what the average number of reviews was for a ranking position.
Oh, so is this caused by using non-normal data?
It can be. We'll get to that one in a minute too. So that's a beautiful thing. But also when you look at it down here just by niche, you can see now these correlations are incredibly strong. And you'd say, wow, reviews are clearly a ranking factor.
Yeah,
Any
that
obs-
meets expectations.
Yeah. Any observations in the data here or other discussion points?
Lee, that your top 100 numbers.
Yep.
Do you have a top 20 aggregate number, an average of the top 20, or no?
I do, and they're similar on this as well. They're similar. I picked everybody's used to seeing the top 100 and stuff like that, so I have that there, but it's very similar. I calculated it for both.
Okay, that surprises me because I figure once you get below 20 in many of these niches, you'll have even unclaimed map listings and map listings that nobody's ever done anything on. So there's a reason there's a reason they're not in the top 20, and probably reviews is not the reason. So.
Yeah, and there may be less of those in the larger cities as well. So if you're looking at 40 of the top cities in the U.S., you're going to have more reviews just in general. You're going to have more sites and more reviews, more sites with reviews.
I wonder how this pattern holds if you went over a larger sample of rankings. So if you did like top 50 rankings, top 100 rankings.
It holds. I'll show you. So if we look at the entirety of it, so each one of these is a little bit different. So you can see here. So Atlanta is the city, pizza was the niche. There are 113 pizza places in Atlanta. The number of reviews correlates at a 0.396. And anything that's green here is statistically valid for the number of records that city has. So like in Providence, there's only 19 roofers that are in Providence, for example. So you can look at this. If you go down to a finer, just below the niche to the actual, the search for Atlanta pizza or Austin dentist or Baltimore chiropractor, you can see that there are differences in the number of records that are in each one of those and a difference in the correlations. But the correlations still hold up strongly. And these correlations are done, across the 113 records, the 335 records. So it's a full data set correlation for each one of those keyword combinations.
You have a question. Is this reviews or ratings? And is there a difference?
Yes, this is total reviews. And yes, there is a difference.
Okay.
We'll get to that.
And
good question,
what does
though.
the green represent again?
It's statistically valid. So if you look at that point, so up here, if you look at this 0.396 right here, the green means that 113 records in a correlation that strongly is statistically valid. So it means it meets the requirement for being much more likely to be causal than random.
So if like Kansas City locksmith, you only have 34. So even though it's like negative.
Even though it's 507, it's not enough data points there to meet the requirement.
Okay.
It's directional, but not there. So if you look at it this way, this may suggest that reviews are a ranking factor. But here's the question, could something else be behind this data? Is there another, factor lurking that could, explain this? You always have to ask that question. So what about the size of a business? Larger businesses have more customers, more reviews. Larger businesses also have, generally speaking, more backlinks. They have tend to have larger websites as well. There's a lot of different factors that go into that. So what about the size of the business? So Ted, to your point, let's look at this first using a clustered reviews versus ratings, because that's a good question that we got to ask about ratings. And you'll notice a few things. When we're looking at the raw numbers, you'll see like here with chiropractor, those rank 21 plus and have an average of 27 reviews. 11 to 20, 96, 4 to 10 there. And in the golden map pack, 154. That's a nice pattern right there. And you can see that pattern generally repeats across all of these, although there's some exceptions like here for lawyer, the 206 is bigger than the 159 and those sort of things. With the ratings, you can see what the average ratings are. So here in chiropractor, all the average ratings are fairly similar. Even though there's a slight tilt here, they're generally about the same. But when you look at something like pizza, there's a significant drop off there. Those ranking down at the bottom, have a much crappier total rating.
So could that imply niches where people often search for best instead of just nearest?
It may be. There may be differences by niche as well. And there's some other data which would suggest that may be true as well. So what I'm looking at here is I'm just seeing just raw numbers. I'm seeing that the trend still appears, the better ranking you have, the better your average rating tends to be, the better the number of views tends to be as well. And so it also makes, oh, go ahead, Terry.
Does that not imply perhaps that the higher you're ranked, the more reviews you get versus the other way around?
It could absolutely be that way, and we can't answer that question. I'm going to tell you, we can't answer that question today.
Damn it.
But I asked Carolyn, she wouldn't tell me. That's the thing. So, at the end of the day, it's a mystery. But it also suggests that maybe ratings are a ranking factor. Now, Ted, you had mentioned this earlier, non-normalized data. That's an excellent thing. Outliers affect averages. So if you have one particular website that has 10,000 reviews, that's going to have a disproportionate weight on correlation and everything else.
Yeah, or like, pizza versus dentist seems like an unfair matchup.
Right. Well, you look here, plumber, top 3 as an average of 2,000 reviews, down here, chiropractor is 154. So, there are some things there that are definitely problematic.
Yeah, and like roofer can't win in this cohort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, roofer's done.
Yeah, lost in the noise.
So let's fix that. So what I did was I looked at the rank position. So if you had the most reviews, you got a number 1, second most reviews, number 2. So it normalizes the data. It takes the outliers away, makes the data a little more flat. And then you can see, like here for chiropractor, the top 3 had an average review position of 26. So you're not seeing the first, second, and third rank at the top. You would if the reviews were the only thing that mattered. It doesn't mean that reviews don't matter, because you can still see there's a drop off from the top to the bottom, but it's not nearly as bad in here. And you can also see some niches like plumber, roofer, locksmith. The top 3, the number of reviews really matters. Dentist, not so much. Massage, not so much. Pizza, not so much. Again, suggesting there may be differences by niche.
Now, were you using random proxies at all? Could this have been affected by location?
Because we're searching using the city name in it, the search location is pegged at city center. So it's not skewed by me this time. Any thoughts on this sort of data? Before we saw that there were huge differences in these trends. Now when you're looking at top 3, 4 to 10, 11 to 20, they're much more similar than they were before. There's still a trend, but it's not as strong.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to guess at the correlation coefficients in this view.
We'll get to that in just one slide, sir. Connor asked a question. He goes, can you expand on how to generate alternative hypotheses? That is a little bit of experience, a little bit of art, and a little bit of luck all blended into a nice cocktail. Sometimes you look at something like this and you have enough experience with the data or this sort of analysis to know, hey, here are some other things that could be going on, like the size of a business can impact this. Or as Terry said, the higher rankings can generate more reviews, which keeps you the higher rankings. So, over time, that gap would tend to, to grow, and you'd see some of the correlations that you see here. Sometimes you don't have a clue. And that's where it's good, like when you do analysis or any sort of testing, to have other people that you can bounce data off of. And, there's a bunch of us that do that all the time. I'll get weird stuff and I will reach out to a lot of different people that I know that have some insight into that. And I'll say, hey, I've got some weird data. Will you take a look at it and tell me if you've got any ideas at all what's going on here? And sometimes they'll go, oh, have you considered this, that? And then you can go and, go down those wormholes to see what you can pull back. But it's not there's not a step-by-step process that I have for generating alternative hypotheses.
Yeah.
What about you, Ted?
There's two roads that I consider, and it basically depends what your purpose is in communicating the information. So one purpose is you're trying to teach people how to use the information, how to use the analysis. And in those cases, it might be more educational to use an analogy. And so in those cases, I try to find simpler examples for the alternative hypothesis. I'll take SEO factors, reduce it down to a concept of, we have an unfair coin that we're flipping. How can we use stats to demonstrate that the coin is rigged? And so you can use your hypothesis and talk through the examples and make the analogy and demonstrate the statistics that way for educational purposes. Or you can stay on topic and you can really go down the reasons why your data may not be telling the story, like how it can go wrong, what other things could be happening, and you can stay on topic. And so, you have to consider your audience and what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to do the most pure science, you will attack the topic. And if you're trying to, teach people how to use the information, you might be more analogous and try to help them understand. And so those are typically the two paths I go down with that.
Cool. So looking at it, I also pulled I clustered these by the different niches. So you can see the difference between the rating correlation and the reviews correlation. And you'll notice that the ratings correlations are considerably lower than the review correlations. That is something that you would expect to see if, for example, the size of a business, were also a ranking factor. The size of a business can, affect the number of reviews that you get, and make those things, much more strongly correlated. Whereas ratings, you can be a large business and deliver crappy service or average service. Another way of looking at the data is the more reviews you have, you're going to tend towards an overall average for the niche. So, it's easy to get 5-star reviews for those first 5 people because, your mom loves you and she'll always give you a 5-star review on your business or your product. But you have to look at that. So one of the things here is because of the disparity between ratings and the total number of reviews, that would suggest that there is at least partially a size factor at play here. You guys have any other observations just scanning through the data? It's hard to do something like this on the fly because there's a lot of data there, and usually you want to spend some time and just take it all in and make notes and generate ideas.
No Chicago pizza.
Sorry, the random assignment made him a chiropractor. But that might have been its own ecosystem all to itself, unlike pizza in any other city. So also could be skewing the data. So one way of interpreting the data is that, it's total number of reviews. People don't care about the ratings. They just care that you have a bunch of people that have used you before. But, going with Terry's, let's look at it backwards. The size of the business generates more reviews, and that's what generates, that's what correlates with the rankings as well.
And for people who don't understand statistics, why do you like these negative correlation coefficients, these green boxes?
Well, if we look at rankings from, 1 to 100, 1 is lower than 100, but it's a better ranking. So generally speaking, you see as you go less in the ranking, less being going 99, 98, 97, all the way up to 1, you tend to see more of a factor, like more reviews in this particular case. So those negative correlations means that it correlates more strongly with those top rankings. It just means that the numbers are going in 2 different directions. So
as the factor measurement goes higher and higher, as you use more and more of a factor, your ranking goes from 99 to 1.
Right.
So the slope of the line is downward. It's not upward and to the left. It's the opposite.
Right.
Or
you also see just based on the
right.
Yeah, based on the green highlights, that there's a lot less, ratings are a lot less statistically valid for predicting rankings.
Yeah. So I like to tell people that those correlation coefficients, they range from -1 to +1. And the closer they are to 0, the more they imply your data is random. And they kind of infer the slope of the trend line. So if it's a -1, your graph of the data would, look like that. And over here, you'd have position 1 on Google, and over here, you'd have position 100 on Google. And on the y-axis, you'd have your factor measurement. So the more you use that factor, the closer to number 1 you get.
Right.
And so that's what we see in those green boxes, is it's saying the trend line looks like it's a factor that influences the rank position. And that's how we like to use statistics to make educated guesses about things. Not that it proves anything, but when you have 2,000 things to guess on, these statistics can help us reduce the field of possibilities down to 2 or 3 dozen likely suspects, and then then we can guess from those and make better educated guesses.
Right.
So how would you leverage this data to get ahead?
Well, there needs to be, and I'm going to talk about that in the conclusions, there needs to be a little more research. There needs to be some additional research, additional testing done in this thing to see if we can determine to what degree reviews may be a ranking factor in local. Here with the data that we have today, you could make an argument that reviews are a significant ranking factor. You could make an argument that reviews are not a ranking factor because there is a size component there that, could be explaining the whole thing. So, we don't know yet, but, part of the purpose today, I mean, it would have been nice to come in here and say, oh yeah, conclusively it is or is not a ranking factor. But generally speaking, that's not the way that these sort of analyses work. And you see them all the time in our industry publications and other industries. It's not SEO that's only guilty of this. It's like we publish this, and because we believe that reviews are a ranking factor, we see the data, therefore they are, or we believe that they're not. So this data is a big lie, and we can hypothesize as to what the lie is that created this mirage. Neither of those things can we do today. We don't have a clear answer here.
But if you had to make an educated guess of the 600 things you could tune for in local, having seen this data, would you put soliciting reviews from your customers on the table?
From a conversion standpoint, I absolutely would. Those are there. I also happen to know that you can rank even in these niches with few reviews. Even in competitive cities, competitive niches, you can do it with very few or no reviews at all. So from an SEO standpoint, I don't spend a lot of time on that, but I don't ignore reviews either. I love great reviews because of the conversion factor. And especially in local, that conversion, those clicks, trigger better SEO rankings. So indirectly, it can impact that.
Now, are all reviews beneficial in this factor?
This is total number of reviews. Obviously, I looked at it, 5-star reviews, 4-star reviews, and on down. And obviously, as you got worse on the number of stars, you got worse on your correlations with ranking. Although in aggregate, it doesn't appear to be that steep a slope.
So,
and I didn't cut through that the way that I did with this data here, looking at by niche, by this, by that. I just kind of did I didn't do an exhaustive set of analysis here.
So Clint, do you have any feelings about reviews and local SEO?
Just looking at what he's got, and from the little that I was able to catch up on, is, correct me if I'm wrong, but having just review stars by themselves doesn't correlate one way or the other. But you did see patterns that if you had more review stars rated as a review, that it somehow did a little bit, not enough to be statistically significant, but a little bit. And then if you think about the process of adding a review stars and then adding reviews, it's engagement with the map. So you click on the review stars, and then you take the time to actually fill out the actual review. And then you take the time to fill out the actual review and make it over 100 characters. And anyone who's messed with a local guide knows that the bigger review you get, the more points you get because you've engaged more with the map. So I would argue that there's 3 levels of engagement there. And each one of those levels has more weight in regards to how they value that review. So what I'm seeing is that whoever has the most engagement and whoever has the most significant engagement is winning. And those people that are actually able to get typed out reviews and are winning over the people with just getting the average stars, and the ones that are getting really well written reviews and more of them are beating the ones that are not. Is that kind of how you'd summarize that?
Parts of it you had the number of reviews, the total number of reviews does correlate with rank position, and it correlates, fairly consistently across a number of different cuts, the niches, the data sets, and everything else. But it also correlates with the size of the business, and some other factors that go along with that, number of backlinks, and those sort of pieces. The CRO implications, we talked about a little bit, but you're bringing in yet another factor, which is the act of writing a review creates local activity, which itself impacts rankings. So
I think it's even more broader than that, is the act of engaging with that map.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do driving directions to that map, driving directions from that map, clicking on the website from the map, clicking on the phone number from that map, doing the reviews, just leaving the stars, adding photos. You're engaging with the map, which is why I think it's harder for us to go do more reviews and you're going to rank higher.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Some of this data, to me, it speaks to the engineering behind the map search, because it doesn't behave the same way as web search. So when you go into maps and you search for, best pizza, it will actually remove best as a keyword, where in web search, best will remain a keyword. And so in the map search, it removes best as a keyword, and it invokes a sort and filter on rating, and then sorts the data. And so when I see data like this, it makes me think that these niches are being searched for with the best keywords. So for like pizza and lawyer, where people would want the best pizza and would typically want the best lawyer, you see that reflected in the correlation strength for ratings. Whereas for, dentist or locksmith, they may just want one that's nearby or available immediately. So I wonder if some of this data might be an engineering artifact of how people are searching using that sentiment and triggering those filters.
That is another, that is a perfect example of why I wanted to do this, on two levels. We don't have an answer for whether reviews impact local rankings, because, we identified size, we identified, interaction with the map. I know that that's true because I can do that with traffic without ever leaving a review and move rankings. So we know that there are other pieces here that haven't been pulled out, of the data to get a clear answer for, is it the review? Is it the stars? Is it the interaction? Is it the size of the business? Some sort of backlink thing that's impacting this? We don't know. And that's exactly sort of the thing I want to leave people with. Is like, we have indications that reviews may be important, but we also have questions about whether it's the review or something else that's creating that. And so I wouldn't go, sell everything and just bet on reviews because whoever has the most reviews wins necessarily. That would be something that would be an interesting test.
Yeah, and I think you need to know in some cases how people are searching in your niche, because if they're always typing in best pizza, you may want to slant your data based on that.
Right. So that's another, that's another good example where you're looking at this and going, is it the way that they're searching? Is it the mechanism there that they're searching for best, and therefore, rating is more important in some niches than in others? Could very well be. And if that's what's going on, then the number of reviews is getting a ride on other things which are actually driving the rankings.
Yeah, and I know that we have Jordan Pierce in the audience, and Simon White mentions he's looking forward to seeing the tool he's developing. And at some point, we should have Jordan on to talk about the research he's doing in local. He probably has a lot of nuggets to drop at this point on the topic.
Jordan always has a lot of nuggets. That's true.
Yeah, and it would be cool to see where the local technologies are going to go. I know a lot of people have been saying, Cora for local for a long time, and it's easier said than done because there's like 5 million factor zones in a GMB, and the formatting of those changes nearly monthly. So, collecting that data is a very daunting challenge. And a lot of the tools out there that claim to be, local correlation tools are pretty feeble when you actually look at what they do compared to what they need to do, to be honest, correlation tools. And that's why I haven't released it. I've tried to do it before and hit that wall. And I know that Jordan's trying to do something along those lines now. So I applaud the attempt. I know how hard it is. And yeah, being able to see that, oh, for this local keyword, you need to put more emphasis on rating than you normally would. Like having the tool like discover that insight and tell you that information would be really cool. Like which, based on how people search within this niche, you need to focus on these fields a little bit more than you should elsewhere. That's the kind of insight that these technologies need to bring to light. And you can totally see it when you search. You can see certain keywords trigger different sorts of filters, and so you need to kind of figure out that palette of triggers, and you need to sculpt the advice based on the niches and how people search and what triggers get fired based on those searches. And it's an interesting engineering problem because you do have to understand how the niche is searched before you consider how to tune the page.
Right. So let's go through to the conclusions real quick. There is correlation with number of reviews, for business and local rank position. Now that average rating correlates worse than number of reviews. That suggests that size may play a significant role. And in this discussion, we have identified other factors that can also play a significant role in that correlation. So these things can partially or fully explain the correlation between review count and local ranking. So we still don't know whether or not from this. And as we've gone through the analysis, we saw, no, it's not. Yes, it is. Maybe it is. And that's kind of the nature of these sort of analyses. So again, when you're looking at these types of analyses and, all of the industry trades and pubs, start asking those questions. What else might cause this? What else might be behind this? What are the flaws in the data? What are the flaws in the way that they've clustered the data? Because you've seen some of that just in this that we presented today. So are there other questions on YouTube?
Oh yeah. Jordan
Uh-oh.
mentions it's very difficult to build and it changes all the time, probably more than organic. That's exactly what I found. It's like 10 times harder than doing Cora easily. Um, let's see. Let's see. Simon White asks, are keywords, entities, and location words and reviews a ranking factor? Did you look at that at all at any point?
No, didn't pull any of that stuff out. That would
So,
require that's a whole nother level of analysis.
so
You know,
that's
I knew when I did this was going to come out one of two ways. Either, you know, the correlation was near zero, like it was for the aggregate, but when you sliced it down into finer and finer pieces, the correlations would still be junk, in which case you could say, hey, there's no evidence that suggests that rankings are, or that reviews are a ranking factor. Or there is some correlation, but there's some other factors as well that have to be considered, and we can't, you know, in this sort of analysis, disentangle those things from each other. So we would left, you know, inconclusive.
yeah. So we don't know the answer to that. And if you're out there and you're looking, if you're a developer and you're looking for an idea that would make you an absolute fortune in this industry, like if you just want to do one thing well and sell it to everyone in the whole SEO space and be able to set your own price and to be the only person out there who can do it and deliver it, and everyone has to go through you to get it. I'm just going to share this publicly. Write an API that parses all the data fields in GMBs. So you take a keyword and all the search parameters and you just create a nice JSON result field and parse the GMBs. And then all the SEO tools out there can use your service, and you'll probably get all of them. You'll get every SEO tool out there subscribing to your service because nobody wants to maintain those parsers. And
Yep.
Jordan says, please call me, laugh out loud. So either Jordan has it and he wants me to buy it from him, or he wants me to shut up right away, or he wants to buy it too.
Yeah.
I don't know which context that please call me is in. My apologies if I killed a secret. But yeah, you know, I would love to be able to use all that data to make a local Cora, but maintaining those parsers to parse all that data is impossible. And I know that there are other tools out there that just get the URLs out of local search and then do a correlation of the on-page content and call that a local analysis. And I don't feel that that is good enough to charge people money for. So I could do that too, and I don't. I just don't think it's right. And so I think if you're going to make a local product, you have to figure out all these GMB fields. You have to figure out how to do all this analysis properly. And then you have something that's worth its weight in gold. But I don't think we're there yet. We have a couple other questions here. They might be off topic. Let's see. Let's say I write 500 words of content and then copy. Does 500 words again on the same page? Will Google count only the first 500 words or also the other duplicate 500 words? You know, I think you'd probably get away with it. I don't think Google is doing a complicated analysis of your page. So if you repeated a passage 2 or 3 times on the page, I don't think Google will notice. Because Google is trying to be done with your page as quickly as possible because they have 200 trillion more pages to get to. So odds are Google doesn't give a shit. That would be my guess. But that, having said that, I have not specifically tested that. So I would recommend you make a test. And, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but my educated guess is Google doesn't care. And also, will Google count different variations of sorting multiple times? Not sure what that means. So maybe follow up with me on Skype or something and clarify, and I'd be happy to talk about it. And with that, I think we have a show. Any final thoughts, Lee?
No, it was fun. I hope that, you know, people take away just how hard it is to, you know, get conclusive stuff, because everybody sees what they want to see in the data, rather than just saying, hey, you know, what is it that I can extract with some degree of certainty, and, you know, what's the hazy stuff that could come back and bite me in the butt.
Yeah, it looks like Jordan clarified, if you're that developer who wants to make that parser that parses all the GMB fields and makes that killer service, sounds like he's willing to joint venture with you on that. So if you need help reaching Jordan, he's in all the groups, but you can also reach out to me and I'll put you in contact with him. Guarantee it's a home run if you can build it and it's stable. That's the trick. So if you can build it and it's stable and scalable, it's a home run solution for sure. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. We'll see you